Hey guys, it's Mitch. How's it going? We're back to another edition of Youngblood number 1. If you've been watching for a little bit, you know I've been on a quest to review every different version of Youngblood number 1 I could, and we're now at the point where we're getting near the end of that quest. I've only got one more Youngblood number 1 to hit after this, so we gotta enjoy them while they last. This one is Youngblood number 1 from 2008, volume 4, if you're counting. So this is the relaunch by Joe Casey, and who's the artist on this? Derek Donovan. Never heard of him. The idea behind this one was down to Joe Casey wanting to kind of get back to the roots of what Youngblood was meant to be. So he envisioned this series as a high-concept satire about celebrity and media saturation. He proposed a new lineup, plucking characters from past versions of different Youngblood teams, and tossing them together to form what he thought would make an interesting mix of personalities that could work well as commentary on a corporate-backed celebrity superhero team. And at least at the beginning, he had Rob Liefeld's full blessing to change Youngblood however he wanted, to change the characters if he wanted to. Bring in new kinds of storylines that weren't like traditionally Youngblood fare, and generally just kind of give him free reign to completely reimagine Youngblood. That didn't last very long. You know, this series didn't reach issue 10 before Rob got itchy fingers and decided he needed to help out, which kind of resulted in the end of the book. But we'll get to that in the wrap-up. For now, let's take a look at the comic. We can start with the cover here. It's a pretty good cover. It's actually got a good concept, kind of a Star Wars trash compactor of Youngblood covers squeezing our team. And, you know, this is a pretty recognizable team, really, if you've been following the Youngblood number 1s, as I have. We've got probably the most common core for a Youngblood team in Shaft and Die Hard and Bad Rock. We've also got Cougar from Team Youngblood, or Youngblood Away Team, whatever you want to call them. And we've got a couple of entries from Alan Moore's short run with Doc Rocket and Johnny Panic. You know, it is a good cover idea, and it's a good composition. The art style isn't really up my alley. Like, this is kind of, reading this thing, it kind of reminds me of, like, Dave Johnson meets Stuart Immonen, and then you kind of water down the results. It's a pretty common look for 2008. A lot of clean lines, a lot of thick outlines, some pretty deliberate spotting of blacks, and that's a pretty good thing. But, you know, no rendering, no cross-hatching. If you're a fan of the 1993 Youngblood, you're not going to dig this too much, which is kind of signing the book's death warrant, really, right from the get-go. You know, this book follows a pattern by Rob Liefeld, where he's continually trying to reinvent Youngblood to try and recapture the success the original Youngblood number 1 had. The problem is that it was completely dependent on its environment. And one big part of that equation was the speculator market. Without the speculator market, you were never going to sell like more than 100,000 copies of a Youngblood book anyway. In addition to that, in 2008, the only people buying a Youngblood book are going to be people who are Rob Liefeld fans. You know, a comic book called Youngblood has been coming out intermittently for 15 years at this point. Every once in a while, it turns out to be something kind of interesting. Most often, though, it's just kind of the same old crap. Most readers are familiar enough with the usual kind of Youngblood crap that anything with a Youngblood title on it by this time, if they're not a Rob Liefeld fan, they're just going to stay away from. So he really does need to just kind of cater to that fan base, which, I mean, these days in 2026, that is what he does at least. You know, it doesn't result in huge sales or anything, but at least somebody's happy with the actual result. All right, so this is Youngblood number 1, in case you weren't sure. Story by Joe Casey, Derek Donovan art and cover, Bill Crabtree colors, Russ Wooten letters, and Rob Liefeld and Matt Yackey provided a variant cover. Oh, and also, new credit, never seen before, Youngblood created by Rob Liefeld. And we get a bit of a breakdown here. They were called Youngblood. They were superheroes. There was a time not long ago, well, 15 years now, when they were the hottest thing going. They held press conferences. They dated supermodels. They invaded foreign nations. Those are all very similar kind of things. They were more popular than Jesus. But the winds of change blow quickly in the media space hurricane. What's hot today can turn ice cold tomorrow. Celebrity superheroes went the way of the Macarena, Ricky Martin, Ally McBeal, and NSYNC. An honest attempt by an aging loyalist to bring it all back unfortunately collapsed under its own weight. I wonder if they're talking about the Bloodsport series there. Maybe. In fairness, this was an aberration. The world simply wasn't ready for a new Youngblood. But that was then. This is now. Yes, absolutely. 2008, people are all over a new Youngblood. We'll talk about the sales figures at the end, too. Okay, so we're going to start things off in... Oh, shit. Am I supposed to be able to read that? I think this is Bloomington. And the first person we're going to meet is some very ordinary-looking dude in a suit. His name is Douglas McGarry. He's from the NSC. And he's putting together a new Youngblood team, so he's here to pick up his new team leader. This is all kind of familiar ground. It's okay, we'll actually deviate a little bit. So it turns out that the team leader is inside the Mall of America, where he's just defused a hostage situation. And just as McGarry is discussing things with Homeland Security here, that operative walks out. It is, of course, Shaft. We can tell by the red hair. Homeland Security guy tells Shaft that he's been reassigned. Shaft at first is like, I'm not doing that shit again. I know the deal. I know what this guy's cooking up. He just wants to do another fucking Youngblood thing. And you can count me out. I've been through like 4 or 5 of these reboots already. Homeland guy says you don't get a choice in the matter. You're a government employee. You're under contract. You're not being invited. You're being reassigned. So follow Mr. McGarry here. He's going to take you to your next assignment. And we're going to get a quick shot of what Shaft had been up to recently to clear up this hostage situation. With a couple of white supremacists who have all sorts of implements poking out of them, because Shaft went in unarmed and just grabbed up all sorts of utensils at some point and started hucking them. You know, it's nice shots and everything. I definitely don't mind the style exactly. You know, I can appreciate the craft behind it. I'll say that. It's just like, where are the lines at, man? There's not nearly enough lines on these pages. It's 2008. Everything's about computer colors. All you need is outlines. Just bugs me. Anyway, from there, we're going to cut to Liberty Island, which is where the headquarters that they're going to be staying at is located. All right, why not? I mean, gives Derek Donovan a nice visual to incorporate anyway. So on their way over, Shaft asks how long McGarry's been with the NSC. McGarry replies by saying about 4 months. Before that, I was with the Omnicron group. That's a little bit awkward. Shaft says, okay, but that's an ad agency. Which is an important thing, because McGarry is the guy who's heading up this project. And he doesn't come from a government background, he comes from a marketing background. But it's okay, because his uncle served as White House Chief of Staff for 7 years, and would have been the new VP if he hadn't passed away on election night. So there is some nepotism involved. It all would have been like business as usual, really. Okay, so once Shaft gets off the helicopter here, he's immediately got a camera crew in his face. It's just a small one at least. But this is going to be part of the deal, because joining Youngblood at this time means that you're going to be on a reality TV show. McGarry says we're partnering with one of the networks to launch a reality show documenting the formation of the new team. So, I mean, like, that's meant to be satire, obviously, but they do kind of do that to an extent these days. You know, like they'll go behind the scenes and make documentaries, like reality show type shit, about sports teams. And I mean, there is a direct correlation between sports teams and superhero teams. I don't think that kind of thing was very common in 2008, really, like reality TV shows were, but not the kind of behind-the-scenes footage that he's thinking of. So that's actually kind of predictive. So Jeff is going to get led into the bowels of the organization with the camera crew following him the entire way, and he's going to get introduced to the new team. And naturally, all the members are guys that he's worked with before, but we're going to have to move through them one by one. And of course, the first one is going to be Badrock. A very, very cartoony version of Badrock. I'm not a big fan of the way that Badrock is drawn in this thing. Everybody else, honestly, to some degree or another, looks pretty good. Badrock, it feels like he couldn't quite lock him down. But yeah, we got Badrock, we've got Cougar, we've got Doc Rocket, and we've got Johnny Panic. Cougar is kind of clear at the gate here that he's only in it for the money. You know, Shaft is a little surprised to see him. Cougar's like, what can I say? Appealing to my sense of civic duty works. And they met my quote. So on the way here, McGarry has been selling this to Shaft as a real super team that's going to battle real threats. But now that he's got most of the team assembled here, you'll note that Die Hard is absent. He's going to get into his full spiel as a marketing guy, saying it's no secret that the rest of the world harbors true hatred for our country and its policies. Of course, irony of ironies, while they hate us, they love Hollywood. Tabloid fascination absolutely extends overseas. Celebrities are our most popular export, second only to superheroes. That's where you enter the picture, the best of both worlds. So this is just a media event, essentially. And he kind of like lets his hands show a little bit here, saying, you're going to be the bright, cheery face of American superhero culture. Something else we'll be getting on the evening news besides troop casualties in Kazakhstan. So this is all just really meant to be a distraction, which Badrock is behind. He's like, I don't give a shit as long as we get paid and paid well, and they're going to be. So the first order of business, now that they're all assembled here, is to sign their contracts. Contracts did get brought up occasionally in the old Liefeld versions, but I mean very occasionally and very kind of vaguely, because I don't think Liefeld really has much of an understanding of contracts. Joe Casey may or may not, but at least he's going to have like contract negotiations like feature in the comic itself, in a comic about celebrity superheroes. And Shaft is getting more and more embittered about this, really. Like, he already went into this thinking it was going to be a farce, and he's just getting it confirmed at every turn. And he kind of looks around and notices, Die Hard was on the duty roster, but he doesn't seem to be here. Is he, where is he? Is he out on assignment or something? And it's like, no, he's down for maintenance, actually. So they've got him in the bowels of the building. Shaft is going to stop in and take a look. As he's on the way, the TV crew here is still, following him every step of the way. And they're like, oh shit, this is going to be the big reunion. We got to get footage of this. This is going to go in episode 1. And Shaft just kind of turns around and tells him, fuck off or you're going to get hurt. Camera girl here tries to pull the professionalism card, being like, look, we're just doing our job. Shaft's like, that's great. I haven't signed my contract. So I haven't agreed to fucking anything. So get out of my face. Which is some fun stuff. I feel like Shaft has had a little bit of a character. You know what? I guess it's having read Youngblood Deluxe before reading this. I was under the impression that the 2008 Youngblood hardcover that was released and was recolored and rescripted, all that shit, reordered in some cases with the pages. I thought that was in advance of this series or setting this series up. And it does seem to be not really the case. It's just kind of released in tandem. But it is, the same version of Shaft where he's more of a military guy. He's not particularly charismatic in front of a camera. He doesn't like having to litz things up, which is not exactly the most, original take on a character, I suppose. But it is nice seeing that continuity, and he does kind of stand out from the rest of the characters in the book. A lot of these characters, they're just kind of in it, they're just kind of in it either for money or, because this is what you do when you're a superhero. You go on a government-sponsored team. So, it is kind of nice having the guy in charge just be, kind of cynical, but still, wanting to get the job done. Probably wanting to make sure that his teammates are going to be okay. He knows all these people, right? He wants to make sure nothing happens to them, at least. All right, anyway, so he gets down to the lab where he finds Die Hard, who looks like he's been pulled apart. Or, maybe he was destroyed and then they're just putting him back together. Hard to say. Well, yeah, he's missing bits off him. He doesn't seem to mind too much. He's trying to talk. And at first his ability to talk is pretty hampered, but he does kind of smooth it out in a second here. But basically it boils down to he's been upgraded and upgraded over the years. And now he's upgraded to a point where his personality has basically been ironed out. He's mostly just a droid now. And kind of a creepy looking droid now with the new version of his helmet. I like it. Again, it does definitely have kind of a Dave Johnson feel. A lot of the stuff in this does. But at least it's a pretty well done pastiche of a Dave Johnson style. That's not bad or anything. I like Dave Johnson. It's like if you have a favorite band and then you have a cover band that does a pretty good version of their songs. It sounds pretty faithful to the originals, more or less. It's like, oh, that's cool. I could listen to a song of that. And it's like, oh yeah, how about an album or 2 or 3? It's like, well, let's not go too far here. I like the idea of Bonfire as a band. I don't want to commit to anything here. So anyway, later on, Shaft is in his quarters and he's trying out his new duds, which come with a little codpiece and everything. All right, I didn't notice that the first time through. Looking like kind of a Chris Sprouse looking design, really. Again, when you're focusing on kind of a clean line style, that is going to be the result, is all these clean line styles, kind of similar looking designs, I suppose. But, hey, that's a good shot of Shaft, checking himself out in the mirror here from kind of a tough angle, too. And yeah, it's pretty well done. And yeah, when he's finished looking himself over, he gets a visitor in his chamber. Some space lady, space apparition, shows up and says a bunch of gobbledygook. In between, there is the odd English word that sounds like there's some kind of warning trying to be issued, but it's not really getting through. And before she can make herself clear, the apparition fades away. So that's obviously laying the groundwork for some kind of development later on in the series. You need those kind of moments in a book, for sure. Okay, so from here, we're cutting back to the team, and now they're sitting in on a marketing meeting. I mean, this is McGarry's specialty. He's right at home here, and he's got, everybody he knows is going to be from this world, so he's bringing in all sorts of marketing specialists. So the specialist, Conrad, says, we'll be operating on multiple levels. The idea is to create the impression of an institution while at the same time positioning you as the next big thing, which sounds like a whole bunch of nothing to me. So first they got to do TV hits in all the major markets. Then they're looking at endorsement contracts, so we get to see Doc Rocket in a Nike ad. That's another thing. You never saw, actual endorsements in Youngblood before, really, I don't think. They were always off, fighting dudes or invading installations. It's where's the celebrity aspect of your celebrity superhero book, Rob? So, in addition to the TV hits, in addition to the marketing, They're also going to be assigned both MySpace accounts and YouTube channels. That's an interesting convergence there because, I mean, MySpace is just about done at that point. YouTube is just beginning. Kind of interesting that it's even being mentioned because it's very new at this time. All right, in addition to that, they've also got to do a photo shoot. Naturally, they got to get all of their promo stuff in. And of course, there's going to be toys. Bad Rock's super pumped about this. I mean, he's had toys before, so it's not like this should be new to him or anything. But we're kind of just like forgetting about all the old Youngblood shit, really. And there's also the Youngblood cartoon that's going to be coming out. Seems a little Teen Titans Go. I don't know if this is around the time that's on or not. And through it all, yeah, like everybody looks pretty good, except for Bad Rock, who looks just like a giant special needs kid in the back. He looks like somebody should have him on a harness. So, okay, now we've got the full scope of what the marketing push on this team is going to be. And it's going to be pretty wide scale by the sound of it. Later on here, they're at a gala event of some kind. Nobody really seems to know what. They're all just meant to show up in costume and smile and, like, give a thumbs up. And, you know, Shaft and Cougar are just, like, taking a second in the bathroom, and Shaft's kind of looking in the mirror going, what the fuck did I get myself into? And then their communicators go off. So they've actually got a real mission that they've got to respond to. So from there, we're going to cut to the scene of the disturbance, and it turns out it's a giant robot that seems to be attacking downtown somewhere. Where are they here anyway? They don't say. Okay. Get a nice big action shot here with Die Hard flying around. You know, I like the look of Die Hard's new suit anyway, where he's all upgraded with like a jetpack and shit. Looks pretty cool. Honestly, the robot feels like it would fit right in Youngblood Volume 3, which was the Alan Moore scripted version. And he's just giving a very dry breakdown of what's going on as he's flying around shooting at this thing, waiting for backup to show up. And naturally, first person to show up is Doc Rocket, and she's going to respond by pulling an AT-AT on him, taking some cable, tying up the legs, and tripping it up so it smashes into some buildings and shit. That's fun. The rest of the team shows up soon afterwards on some cool new, probably branded vehicles. Shaft gets a motorcycle. Looks like Cougar gets like the spinning wheel from, what is it? Return of the Sith? I think so. And they're going to start off with Shaft launching an explosive arrow, creating a breach so that they can enter the robot itself. Meanwhile, outside, Die Hard's still flying around, zapping the thing. Apparently, he's got like an Iron Man chest blast kind of thing. We've also got the camera crew following around in a helicopter, filming the entire thing, including when Die Hard flies a little bit too close to the head and gets zapped by some I-beams and sent flying. Doc Rocket goes sprinting after him to make sure he's okay. Inside the robot, Shaft is launching like explosive arrow after explosive arrow at the hatch to the head. But they're not really making much of a dent just yet. But it turns out to be kind of a moot point. After checking in with Die Hard, making sure that he's still relatively undamaged, because that's the best you can do. He doesn't, feel any particular kind of way. She notices that a troop transport's flying in and relays this to Shaft. Shaft immediately gets everybody inside of the robot to get away from the hatch because he knows what's coming. Looks like they're airdropping Bad Rock onto the robot. Lands right on the skull, dents it pretty well, and shakes up the whole thing. And I mean, that demolishes the cockpit, and I assume the pilots inside as well. They are just killing everybody inside, I believe. Like we've seen the beginning where Shaft was dealing with those guys taking hostages, so we know how Shaft deals with threats in this universe. Like he's a military guy, he's going to just eliminate targets. And yeah, that's kind of it for the threat. It's a little bit truncated, really. It feels like there should be a bit more wrap-up on this, but no, we are from there going to flip straight to McGarry's office. So yeah, I feel like that could have been paced a little bit better, but you do definitely get the gist of what's going on. And at the end here, Shaft is looking around the interior of the robot and realizes he recognizes the tech, which could mean a bunch of things. I assumed at this point it meant that the robot was manufactured by the same people that were running Youngblood. Like that tech there was the same that was in like the Die Hard lab or something. Because that would make some sense. I don't know if that's the case or not. The only hang up there would be that if the guys on the inside are government agents, which again would make some sense, they've all been slaughtered by Youngblood. So that's probably not the case. But as we cut back to McGarry's office here, he's going to get a phone call, and this is going to be from Geiger from back in the Youngblood Strike File days. Apparently he's been reassembled, and McGarry has hired him to put together a crew because they're going to be the next threat that Youngblood has to tackle. So this is going to be Mayhem Incorporated. and they're ready to roll. So yeah, that's the deal in this one. It's not that they're completely manufacturing threats, it's their outsourcing threats. You know, there are no real threats for Youngblood to fight right off the bat, but they do want to get their new investment up and running and providing that spectacle. That's basically the point of the entire project. And you might think, like, what? So the government just paid for a giant, probably multi-billion-dollar operation just to provide a distraction? It's like, well, for one thing, it probably wouldn't be the first time. But for another, they were saying how the project was largely funded by those endorsements that were mentioned earlier. Which does make some sense, I suppose. So yeah, that's it for the issue. Next issue of Youngblood, the new adventures of the world's most infamous celebrity superhero team continues. Is the new Youngblood a bona fide force for good, or just another marketing scheme cooked up by the US government? Either way, it's time for the team to go head-to-head with their focus-tested adversaries, Mayhem Incorporated. The Palms Las Vegas will never be the same. So yeah, I mean, honestly, that doesn't sound like a bad idea for an issue. Oh shit, we're going to get all sorts of stuff in here. Apparently these are all Image titles that are coming out at the same time, like Sharkman and Jack's Staff and Noble Causes. I never heard any of that shit, but okay. And I guess this is around the time when Eric Larson is running the show over at Image and kind of ignoring his own book, really. And there's an ad for the Youngblood Deluxe hardcover with the recolored, rescripted pages. It did end up being an improvement on the original Youngblood story. So yeah, that is going to do it for Youngblood Volume 4, number 1. Honestly, it's a pretty good version. You know, the hooks we're getting for this book, they're not like super inventive or anything, really. Like, you can kind of see the twists coming out a little bit, at least for issue 1. Which I think is okay, so long as it's well executed. And as it turns out, it is. You know, it's well written, like the script is pretty clean, and the art is well done. You know, again, it's not exactly to my taste, but I can't deny that this is at least a skilled version of this style. So yeah, I mean, like, I could totally read more issues of this, and I don't think I'd have a bad time doing it. So it must have done pretty well, right? You know, this thing's designed to be like lockstep with what was getting popular in 2008, down to the art style, down to being like more of an indie kind of take on superheroes. I was like, well, you know, maybe it was. That didn't really help it too much when it came to actually ordering copies. It looks like the first issue here sold a whopping 15,000 copies for a Youngblood number 1. Like, and it's not like this is the days of arcade comics when Rob was basically shopping Youngblood Bloodstrike? No, Youngblood Bloodsport and Youngblood Genesis around to dealers without the benefit of a distributor. You know, this is an Image Comics publication, and it's still got nothing. Again, probably because nobody who wasn't a Liefeld fan was going to pick up a Youngblood book, and a lot of Liefeld fans weren't going to pick up this Youngblood book that didn't look anything like Youngblood. It's a bit of a shame, really, because it does seem to be a fun version. So what happened to this version of Youngblood? Well, it didn't last very long, as I think I hinted at the beginning of this. Joe Casey, even though he was promised free reign to do whatever he wanted with the book with no interference, he got about 8 issues of that. And then Rob decided that he wanted to get in on the trend that was going on in comics at the time, where other comics were featuring Barack Obama on the covers of their books. I think specifically a Spider-Man book had Barack Obama on it. I mean, as did Savage Dragon, for what that's worth. I don't think that really helped him too much with the marketing. I guess that wasn't really the point of that, though. That, you know, like Eric Larson, I don't think he cares too much about how much Savage Dragon sells. Like, if he does, he'd have a fucking anxiety attack every other month. But anyway, yeah, Liefeld decided that Youngblood, being a government-based book, you know, should feature interaction with the current sitting president, Barack Obama. And I mean, you can kind of see the logic there, but at the same time, you know, Joe Casey didn't want anything to do with that. He was writing a satire, didn't have to have real-life politics in it. And, you know, it didn't have anything to do with the story that he was trying to tell. So naturally, what Rob Liefeld did was he put together a 6-page sequence where Barack Obama, I think, broke up the team and introduced like a new version of the team or some shit like that. And basically completely changed the direction of where the book was going. And since he had full control of the book, full editorial control anyway, that's just how it was going to be. And Joe Casey kind of had to deal with it. So he dealt with it by saying, okay, peace, and walking off the book. And then, you know, Youngblood Volume 4, Issue 9 came out. No Issue 10 came out, like ever. Because of course it wouldn't. I mean, like, Rob Liefeld had an idea for one gimmick for an issue that I don't think helped sales at all. Yeah, no, if anything, it did the opposite. Youngblood number 8 sold 15,000 copies. Youngblood number 9 sold 6. So Rob had a great idea for his comic that essentially sewered the comic. You know, way to go, bud. It is interesting to think about where Rob would take Extreme Studios after this, because, I mean, 3 years from now is when Rob decided to go with the Extreme Studios relaunch that was done all by indie creators. And I mean, in that case, he promised that, you know, they could work without any kind of interference, and at least he stuck to it. So it seems like he learned from the Joe Casey debacle anyway. Again, didn't help him in terms of issue sales. None of those books sold either. But, you know, I discussed this in the Prophet number 21 review. It probably wasn't even mostly the point of that rebrand to sell floppies. It was more to put a new spin on characters to kind of remarket them and make them more palatable as licensing IP. So, I mean, this was a good book. It didn't last very long, but in a long roundabout kind of way, it did end up kind of being the catalyst for a lot of really interesting comics that came out just a few years after this. You know, I don't know if any of them were good, but they were very different. And hey, even that in itself is like, wow, that's surprising. We'll be taking another look at that 2012 relaunch soon. I've got my copy of Glory number 23 now. So that'll be some fun stuff to go over. That's one of the more interesting rebrands I saw. As for Youngblood, we've only got one issue to go, the 2017 relaunch. So we'll take a look at that in a few weeks. And hey, after that, I'll be able to say I have reviewed all of the Youngblood number 1s in existence, except for Youngblood Imperial, which seems to have had a print run so small that it basically doesn't exist anyway. So it doesn't count. My accomplishment is valid. Well, for this one anyway, that is going to do it. So thanks very much for watching, guys. If you got this far, don't forget to hit like, hit subscribe if you haven't already. If you're watching on mobile, you can hit the hype button. I wouldn't mind. And right about now, you should be seeing a link to my Patreon. If you want, you can go check that out too. That gives you access to everything I do, so all sorts of videos, all sorts of Blood Force stuff, as well as some exclusive weekly updates. I'm trying to put in the work to actually make it like worthwhile to subscribe to the extra shit that I do. But yeah, that's going to do it for this one. Thanks again for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.